Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ABC 3 Ortega versus Rodriguez, also called UFC Long Island. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm good, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. We got a 14 fight card here that you mentioned to me before we started recording. This is pretty strong. I normally think that we're two guys that don't pretend every single fight night card is amazing. There are a bunch of them that, frankly, if I didn't watch them for work, I'd probably give them a miss and just kind of check the news the next day and see which fights were worth going back to watch. This isn't one of them. This one's got pretty good stuff top to bottom.
Yeah. What stands out to me, like in the rankings, there's not too much going on, but the excitement factor, like you have so many exciting fighters. Like the main event, you have Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez. Is there two more exciting fighters in the division than those two guys?
Really, there aren't, and that's not even guaranteed fight of the night. Like,
No.
there are three other fights on the main card that could easily snap it up if you're thinking about the same ones as me. I mean, Shane Burgos versus Charles Jourdain, Matt Schnell versus Mudaerji,
Yeah.
and Jingliang Li versus Muslim Salikhov could all be just absolutely dynamite.
Yeah, and it just so equally balanced, the card, like how equally matched some of these ones are. Some I did peek at some of the lines. I know we don't do that, but I did peek, and I thought some of the lines were way off. I thought some of the fights that looks like there's a big favorite. I think the big favorite shouldn't be that big of a favorite. I think it should be pretty close. So overall, really good fun card.
Absolutely. Unless you've got any other thoughts in general about this one, let's just dive right in. We head to the strawweight division for a matchup between veteran inaugural strawweight Jessica Penne and the UFC's newest strawweight, though she's hardly an unknown quantity, in Emily Ducote. Penne, the 39-year-old Californian, is 14-5 overall. She is 3-3 since joining the UFC as a former Invicta atomweight champ and as a veteran of the 20th season of The Ultimate Fighter, the one which once again did bring us Rose Namajunas, Carla Esparza, that entire first class of 115-pound women. She is back from a pretty lengthy absence. She left the UFC on a long losing streak, came back after 4 years away, and has put together back-to-back wins over Lupi Godinez and Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Both of those were last year. The most recent of those, her tapping out Kowalkiewicz, was in August. So it has been almost a year since she's fought. She is now 39, and she is going to welcome to the UFC Ducote, which, well, let's get the facts and figures out of the way first. 28-year-old Oklahoman is 11-6 overall. She is the current reigning, now vacating Invicta strawweight champ. She is a former Bellator flyweight title challenger. She's the one that fought Alima Lay McFarland for the inaugural Bellator flyweight crown and got tapped out late. But nonetheless, she's been around. She has, 17 total fights, and I think a dozen of them are in either Invicta or Bellator. So again, she's not your average prospect just popping into the UFC out of nowhere. And she is the slight favorite here. Minus 135, Penne plus 115 as the underdog. Emily Ducote is definitely the tale of two fighters, because at 125, she really was just another woman in the division. In Bellator, she had her good fights and her bad fights. She fought Christina Williams, fought, I think, Alejandra Lara. She fought the whole kind of pool of contenders there underneath McFarland. She fought McFarland twice, definitely came up short both times. Then she dropped to strawweight, and she is an entirely different fighter now. And the main difference is that she has found power on the feet that she simply didn't display at 125. It's transformed her. She busted up Danielle Taylor with a head kick that was one of the best knockouts of last year. She defended against Alicia Zapatella and just absolutely thrashed the former atomweight champ. Just one of the worst beatings of this year so far. I'm interested to see what she does in the UFC. Again, she's not someone I ever would have figured to be excited about her UFC debut at strawweight, of all things, when she was just kind of treading water over in Bellator. But I like this matchup with Penne to start with because uh, Jessica Penne, she's well-rounded, always been a bit of an overachiever. She was never a spectacular athlete, even when she was 30, let alone 37, 38. She's now 39. She's a good nullifier. Penne, like her original background was striking. She calls herself a kickboxer, but she has way more submissions than knockouts, and she's a kind of a grindy fighter.
Mhm.
If Ducote can kind of keep Penne off of her and uncork another one of these highlight reel knockouts or bloody stoppages that she's had in her last couple of fights, it's game on. Strawweight finally is ready for some new blood. The kind of gang of five that's hung out at the top there for a while, I think they're finally starting to burn through all the possible matchups with each other. And your Marina Rodriguez's and everyone that have been waiting at the door, your Amanda Lemos that we'll talk about later tonight, they're kind of ready to get their shots within the next year or so. And Ducote could be right there with them. For this one, I do like her to win. Penne's, it's been a great story since she's been back. I figured she was retired when she lost her fourth fight in a row back in 2019. She's looked great since she's come back, or sorry, 2017. It was like
Yeah,
4
she
years
was out
off.
for a long time.
Yeah, she was out for 4 years, came back at age 38 and has looked good ever since. But you can't feel good about what would have happened to her in the year since her last fight, as she's now pushing 40. I think this is Ducote's time. Younger, faster, bigger, and again, newly found power and kind of a nasty attitude on the feet. Give me Emily Ducote by a second round TKO.
Yeah, I agree on a lot of things you're saying about both fighters. I really liked how you described Jessica Penne as a nullifier because, yeah, when you watch her fight, there's nothing that really jumps out about Jessica Penne, but then she finds ways to win. I mean, she's an aggressive fighter. She does best when she's the one leading the dance, marching down her foe. She doesn't really like being pressured back on her back foot. Something like you want to get Jacek when she fought for the title, like smash her doing that. Again, a much different time than it was then. She doesn't really avoid shots too well. She keeps her head on the center line. She does throw good straight shots down the pipe, which I like. She has a long jab, but she's a bit of a point fighter. She lacks power, kind of arm punches. She uses her length well. I mean, she's a big fighter for the weight class. Tall. She tons of kicks. She will throw some naked leg kicks, and she'll keep her chin high in the air, like she's going to get really hurt doing that. But her long legs are also targets, like big targets to get kicked out. But you mentioned like nullifying. She nullifies in the clinch. She gets in the clinch. She uses her height advantage. She looks for body locks inside. You mentioned that she talks about herself as a kickboxer. I disagree. I think she's much more of a grappler. She'll catch a kick or just bull rush her opponent to the canvas. She will shoot for takedowns, but I wouldn't say she's a strong technical wrestler. But she is a BJJ black belt. She has a submission threat. She has 8 submissions on her record. Ducote, it's funny. I think you said she's 27 or 28?
20. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because she's much younger than you think because she seems like she's been around so long. I was thinking she's going to be like 32 or something,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously something I like hearing that she's much younger than that. On the feet, high output. She's someone who builds over the fight. Like her output increases as the round goes on. Very boxing style. She stays in her opponent's face, cuts off the cage really well, which is surprising because she's a little flat-footed and she's not a great athlete, but she does cut off the cage really well. She likes to step in the pocket and unload big power shots. Everything's tight inside strikes, short shots. Her counter striking is really good. Her best punch is her counter right hand. She keeps her chin tucked. She avoids shots with good movement, a lot of L stepping. She doesn't like being pressured. I know I throw it out there a lot. I don't know if anybody really likes being pressured, but she has good calf kicks. She does throw some naked leg kicks, which is a little concerning. She is a little heavy on her front foot. So if she doesn't check leg kicks, they are big targets. But she's also, I mean, she's from Oklahoma. That's like a mecca of wrestling. And she has a wrestling background, nice entries, good reactionary double. She also likes like single legs running the pipe. She has 4 submission wins. A good example of her wrestling, a fight that you didn't mention when you were going through like the resume, the Daniel Taylor, Alicia Zapatella, is Gianna Lima, which was a really good win that she had. So I'm with you, man. I'm going with Ducote to win her debut. Penne is more tough than she is technically skilled, so she has that God-given length where she can kind of be tough to kind of learn and pick up. But I see Ducote staying in her face, countering her shots, maybe landing a takedown and two, and adding a new face to the division. Give me Ducote by decision.
There you go. 2 picks for Emily Ducote to have a successful UFC debut, and probably for the interest to turn into a, full-fledged little mini bit of hype here. Next up at UFC Long Island, we have a welterweight matchup between Phil Rowe and Abubakar Nurmagomedov. Rowe, the 31-year-old New Yorker by way of Florida, who goes by the Fresh Prince, is 9-3 overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC out of the 3rd season of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost his debut to Gabriel Green, which turns out Gabriel Green's quite a prospect in his own regard. He's come back from that with back-to-back TKO wins over Orion Kosi and Jason Witt. The most recent of those, the Witt fight, was back in February at UFC Fight Night Hermanson versus Strickland. He'll try to make 2 straight into 3 straight against Nurmagomedov. This one really is a cousin of Khabib. 32-year-old Dagestani is 16-3-1 overall. He is just 1-1 since joining the UFC out of the wake of the first season of Professional Fighters League. He lost his debut to David Zavada back in 2019, had a couple years off for reasons that I will mention in a few minutes, came back last March at UFC 260 and won a unanimous decision over Jared Gooden, and has once again been out since then. So even though his last appearance in PFL was 3.5, almost 4 years ago, he has fought just twice since then. This will be the 3rd time. Nonetheless, despite all the shelf time, he is a slight favorite here. He's around minus 145 right now, Rowe plus 120. Keith, I'm going to throw this to you for your pick first, but I'm going to throw this out there first. When he came out of Professional Fighters League at the end of 2018, I was on board. Abubakar Nurmagomedov, possible future champ in this division. He was obviously the best guy in PFL's 170 division. Maybe him and Magomed Karamov, but hurt his hand in the playoffs. And so, even though he was on his way to the semifinals, had to drop out. But since then, I mean, he had a long time on the shelf for his part in the UFC 229 brawl. He was one of the first 2 guys in the cage, duking it out with Conor McGregor as Khabib jumped over the fence, went and chased Dylan Dennis. Like, he had a central role. He had a long suspension because of that. Came back for 1 fight, lost, and then was back on the shelf again for over a year with injuries. I mean, your hype for him might not have been as high as mine was 4 years ago, but whatever you thought it was, do you think there's anything left there now? I mean, he's 32. It's welterweight.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's 32. So this is a really good fight. Like we said that at the end. Like I like both guys. I think both guys are pretty good additions. Back to like the old Conor McGregor thing. I just want to say this. That was a really bitch move. I'm sorry. Like, Conor said some things he shouldn't have said, but to jump over a cage and attack, and I know Tukagov was the one who attacked him from behind, but to attack a guy who's not throwing punches at anybody, who just fought 20-something minutes against the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, arguably the most dominant fighter in the history of the sport, to jump over and attack a guy who just fought, like, that was such a bitch move. And I'm, me, I like the Dagestanis. I think that those are the real gangsters. Like, those are, I mean, I guess that's what it is. Like, we say we're going to attack you, we're going to do it. So you got to at least respect that.
You like the Dagestanis, and you generally like the drama. You like the shit talk.
Oh, I love the shit talk.
But yeah, but when it crosses over,
yeah. I'm not saying it wasn't fun. like, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying it's a bitch move. Like, on the flip side, like, I want those guys having my back too. Those are my, like, I want those kind of friends. Yeah.
And, I mean, he and Tukagov both did what, like 18-month suspensions for that.
Yeah. Like, those are the kind of friends I want. That are willing to jump over, and so if I get into it like the softball field, who's got my back? Who's got to Tukagov somebody for me? I don't know if I was picked him to be a champion, but I mean, anytime you have the last name Nurmagomedov, it's gonna carry so much weight, and there's so much promise. Uh, the Dagestanians right now, that team is so blazing hot. He's a southpaw who I would say he's actually a pretty underrated striker. Got some power in his hand. He's got a power jab. I did a lot of film study of him in the past, and one of the fights that I really focused on was the uh, uh, and I might butcher the guy's name, Bojan Velikovic. I don't know if I said that
Bojan
right.
Veliskovich, yeah.
Yeah, that was a fight that I watched a lot of. Um, what I don't like, he's kept trying to throw the rear uppercut, like with no setup, which I really don't like. But what he wants to do, even though he's got some power in his hands, he wants to get the fight to the ground. He's a very good wrestler, obviously. Uh, he will shoot and miss shots and have no panic at all because he's just trying to close the distance. He has to make it this far. If he makes it this far, that's fine. He shoots the next one. He eventually gets it there. What I don't like is that he'll shoot pretty far without any setups. And he actually was taken down a little bit in the PFL against very low level guys. But he's got a really good get up game. He doesn't mind getting taken down because he kind of creates a scramble. But he was Zawada did catch him in a submission. 2 out of his 3 losses are subs, and he was pretty gassed against Velikovic in their fight. Like halfway through the fight, I mean, he dug deep, but he was sucking some air in that fight. And I think he's got a tough test. Phil Rowe is. I wasn't super high on him coming in, but he looks better and better each fight. Now he's beaten some low level UFC talent, but he's a massive welterweight, huge for the weight class. He's long and lengthy. I mean, he's got an 80-inch reach. He's well rounded. He's a good athlete. He uses movement really well. He will back straight up to avoid shots, which I don't like. But everything else is pretty technical on the feet. He's good at keeping his range, keeping his opponent's end of his punches. He sits on his punches, draw some power. He has tight shots down the pipe. Though one thing I don't like, he can drop his hands a little bit when he returns. But I love that he rips the body. I mean, he brutalized Kosi with body shots. Underrated power. He has, I think, 5 knockouts on his record. He knocked out Jason Witt in his last fight. He doesn't kick enough, but when he does, they're really powerful. I don't know if he wants to throw kicks at a Nurmagomedov, make it easier to get taken down, but it's just something he has. Very strong plum clinch. He gets inside due to his size. He likes knees. He's not much of an offensive wrestler, but he can grapple a little bit. This guy's been competing in a lot of BJJ competitions. He has a submission threat. Guillotine is his favorite sub, which is something he can maybe catch on Nurmagomedov coming in. He'll also pull guard. Like that's how confident he is in his ground game. He'll look for subs off his back instead of scrambling to his feet, which I don't like. And I really hate that against a strong grappler like Nurmagomedov. But if he ends up top, he has some pretty good ground and pound. So it's funny that you said that out of all the Nurmagomedovs, I actually think Abubakar might be the worst one of the Nurmagomedovs. Now, again, like that'd be like saying I don't know. Of the starting 5 of the dream team, Charles Barkley was the worst one or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like the bar is extremely high. Yeah. If he turns this into a wrestling match, which is most likely is his path to victory, he could easily win with top control. However, I'm not as pressed on him as you are. I actually think Rowe's going to beat him up a little bit on the outside. He will get taken down, but I think Rowe will stay busy enough on the bottom to maybe get some openings, get back to his feet, maybe stall Abubakar out. And then when he's on his feet, I think he can land some big shots. I think Abubakar might gas out. I think Rowe might make him pay. So I'm going with an upset. I'm going to say Rowe, second round TKO.
Awesome. Then we have a little bit of dissension right away because while I think Rowe is a very appropriate kind of next matchup for Nurmagomedov, like it's very appropriate both ways, just in terms of where they are in the division. I think the stylistic matchup favors Nurmagomedov. Like Rowe is coming off back-to-back knockouts of Kosi and Witt, but Kosi and Witt both took him down. And Nurmagomedov's a better wrestler than either of them. Like I know, like both those guys are good wrestlers, but they're good wrestlers by the standard of marginal UFC welterweights, while Nurmagomedov is just a flat out good wrestler. So I think the dynamic really is what you say it is. Like I expect Nurmagomedov to be able to take Rowe down in the first round, probably kind of easily. And from there, it's just a matter of, is Rowe staying busy from the bottom? Is he trying to sweep? Is he trying to submit? Is he just letting Nurmagomedov camp out on top of him? And because Rowe, not only did he get taken down by Kosi and Witt, he had a little trouble getting up in the first round, but they both got tired before he did. He did a lot of damage on the feet and just ended up winning anyway. I don't know if that's a path to victory against Nurmagomedov. Like, the one unknown here is, of course, he's been gone for a long time again with injury. Is he the same guy? 32 should be right in his prime as a welterweight, but not if you're constantly busted up. I'm cautiously going with Nurmagomedov to win a decision here, but I would not be surprised at all if it turns out just like Rowe's last couple of fights, where he struggles with the wrestling in the first round, turns on the jets in the second, and knocks Nurmagomedov out. But I am going to go, and I'll be the chicken shit guy and go with the slight favorite to win a tough decision.
Hey Ben, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change my pick. You convince me. Did you stop recording?
No, like we're going straight through. Yeah.
Honestly, you convinced me.
That's so funny.
It was one of these fights I was on the fence for. So yeah, you know what? You're right. He's gonna get the takedowns. Yeah, you're right.
my most lukewarm pick of the night. Like,
oh really?
Yeah.
You seem very confident.
No. I'm confident in how good I thought Nurmagomedov was in 2018, 2019. I was like, this is a top 5 welterweight on skill who still makes a lot of mistakes. And I thought he was the kind of guy that might lose one of his first 3 or 2 of his first 4 fights in the UFC and then just turn it on. Now I just don't know what we have left. But I do think you can.
I'm gonna switch my pick to Nurmagomedov. But you know what I'm gonna do? No matter what happens, I'm gonna take credit.
I think you absolutely should do that. The UFC on ABC 3 undercard heads to the middleweight division for a matchup between Dwight Grant and Dustin Stoltzfus. Grant, the 37-year-old New Yorker by way of San Diego, is 11-5 overall. He is 3-4 in the UFC since joining out of the second season of Dana White's Contender Series. He is coming off of back-to-back losses, those against Francisco Trinaldo and Sergey Kondoshko. The most recent of those, the Kondoshko fight, was back in April at UFC Fight Night Lemos versus Andrade, where he got knocked out in the second round. That apparently made the man who goes by the Body Snatcher decide to move up to 185 pounds. This will be his debut at middleweight in the UFC, and awaiting him there will be Stoltzfus, a guy who is very badly in need of a win himself. Stoltzfus, 30-year-old Pennsylvania native by way of Germany. He basically took his training over to Germany, fought on the German regional scene, and kind of broke back into U.S. promotions from Germany, and has kind of a German-sounding last name. So it was kind of a surprise to me the first time I heard him talk. I'm like, oh no, you're American. Anyway, 13-4 overall. 0-3 in the UFC since joining out of the 4th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost his debut to Kyle Dawkins, then got choked out by Rodolfo Vieira, then got choked up by Gerald Meerschaert. Both of those third round rear naked chokes. The most recent of those.
That's a hell of a run, though. That's damn, dude. He pissed some people off. What was it? It was Dawkins,
Vieira, Meerschaert.
When Meerschaert's the worst guy in the group, that's a pretty tough run.
It really is, and
the UFC must have thought he was German too.
Yeah. Stoltzfus, as you might expect, is a slight underdog here. He's plus 145, Grant minus 170. Well, Keith, Dwight Grant, clearly he saw some writing on the wall somewhere and decided his best chance of turning things around was to move up to 185. Stoltzfus, I guess, just decided to stand pat and see if things turn around on their own. Who gets it done here?
Yeah, so on paper, I'd say this is probably like the least exciting fight on the card, and I should say, as in talent, like the excitement's gonna be fun. Like Dwight Grant is, well, I shouldn't say that because Dwight Grant, I think was it the Alan Jourdain fight that was. I think
that one wasn't great, and that's the one that Jourdain really got mad about. Yeah.
That fight wasn't great, but usually he's in a pretty banging fight. And as you just mentioned, Stoltzfus, yeah, he pissed somebody off because his start to the UFC was a hell of a start. Grant, he's a really large welterweight. He has this Alex Oliveira type build where he has these long arms, big frame. He's a very unorthodox striker. He throws from his hips, but he throws everything hard. He tries to end the fight with a single shot. He loads up on every shot. He has power too. He is wild. He tends to reach and overextend at times, kind of put himself in position to be countered. But he really puts everything in it. His when he brings everything in, he's much better. When he pulls everything in, his left hook, excuse me, is a good shot. His straight right is a good shot. He throws some hard body kicks. I don't like that he leaves his chin high in the air. He's not a great wrestler, but he has some pretty good control because he's so big. Though defensively, he's been taken down 7 times in his last 8 fights, which I don't like. Now, Stoltzfus, despite being 0-3 in the UFC, I think he's pretty well rounded. He can fight out of both stances. A little bit of a low output striker, but he has some underrated power. He sits on his punches. His right hand, he kind of like really whips in and has some good power. He'll throw the occasional spinning attack. Throws a lot of kicks, good kicks. He's a good wrestler. He's hard to take down, and I think he has 7 submissions on his career, including even has a knee bar, which I like. He throws some leg locks on. He's got a twister, so he has a submission threat. I've never been high on Grant, but I am worried that he could just out volume Stoltzfus or just connect with one of those big looping shots. However, I see Stoltzfus getting some takedowns and working me a little bit. Stoltzfus is 0-3. So, like I said about Stoliarenko, Stoltzfus is due. He's due to win. So, give me Stoltzfus by decision.
And you turned out to be absolutely right about Stoliarenko. I missed the recap for UFC Vegas 58.
Yeah, she do.
She was due. And I said, there's no way she beats Jesse Clark unless Clark just like dives straight into an armbar in the first 2 minutes of the fight. Like, who would do that?
Yeah, almost starts her first. Almost starts her in the first 10 seconds. Yeah.
And as you mentioned, she hits hard. You were dead right about that fight. I'm so glad I didn't have to go on that recap and just take that medicine.
You always say that, dude. When do I ever give you shit when I get one right?
Well, it's you and the peanut gallery in the live chat. But no,
I mean that one time I went 4-0, I gave everyone shit. But hey, I just got talked out of a pick. So what the hell do I know?
Well, don't let me talk you out of this one, but I'm going to differ with you again. I don't think Grant's ceiling is that high. I don't think he was ever really a top 15 talent at 170 or 185. But at age 37, on the kind of run he's on, I do like the move up to 185. He's not going to be undersized. I mean, he's going to be bigger than Stoltzfus, and it's going to fix some of the problems.
I agree.
He'll be quicker by comparison against a 185er. I don't think his ground game that kind of runs on his size and strength, I don't think it's especially going to suffer here. And hopefully his chin's better. Hopefully his cardio is better. So I like this as a move for him. And if it just extends the Dwight Grant experience, like I'm not even talking about like a rebirth, but if it just gives us 4 or 5 more fun Dwight Grant fights, but before he decides to hang him up, I'm here for it. And I like him to beat Stoltzfus here. I'm interested to see what happens when it hits the ground. Stoltzfus likes grappling. He'll be happy to keep it there and try to get Grant in trouble. I think Grant's going to hurt him on the feet. I think Grant's going to outland him, and I think he's going to sting him some. Like, I'm not picking a knockout, but I'm picking a fight where Grant probably wins all 3 rounds, and there's just no real comfortable place for Stoltzfus. He's going to get outlanded on the feet. He's not going to be able to make the things work that he wants on the ground. And here at 185, Grant's not going to get tired. So give me Grant by pretty comfortable 3-round decision. So this is as good a place as any to talk about the little square dance do-si-do of 135 and 140 5-pound fights that happened on Thursday before fight week. And like hot off the presses, as of when we're recording this, we don't know what the final matchup's going to be, but we have kind of a guess. So let's talk about this just for a moment, because we were scheduled to have a featherweight matchup featuring Herbert Burns against the debuting, finally, Hussein Ashkabov. There aren't many names that trick me up, but
And there's
Ashkabov.
a whole bunch that trick me up. So
Yeah. And we were supposed to have a 145-pound matchup between Bill Algeo and Billy Quarantillo. I'm not dead sure about the Burns and Ashkabov one. It might have been 135. I can't get a clear answer on that one, but that kind of mattered, because if it's at 135, that's a big ask of Herbert Burns, who is huge, and his most distinguishing feature at featherweight was that he always weighed in at 150 pounds. So,
yeah, I think the fight was at 145.
well, if it's at 145, then as good of a prospect as Ashkabov has looked like, all of his best outings have been at 135. So that at least would have been interesting to see him enter against a big 145er in Herbert Burns and see if all of his skills could translate. But we can't have nice things. That's not what's happening. Quarantillo and Ashkabov are both out, apparently, with injuries. So the UFC has put together Burns versus Algeo. I mean, any thoughts on this one? I'll tell you, my thought is that I like that Bill Algeo has found a place in the UFC. I don't think he's a
Yeah.
future contender, but he's a guy that is generally in fun fights, and uh you know, looks like he could probably stick around on roster for a while, be kind of a good test for new guys coming in out of the contender series. If he strings together a couple wins, he'd be a guy you can throw in against kind of like a borderline top 20 guy and see if he's turned a corner. He just looks to me like a guy who's settled in as a good roster guy.
Yeah, so I'm a little bummed about the change of the fights, and I'll tell you why. It's plain and simple. The four guys you named, I like all four guys. I think all four guys are pretty good. So just to lose a fight, and then Ashkabov, or however I say his name, I apologize.
That was perfect. You said it better than I did.
Yeah, dude, that guy looks really good. When you watch him on paper, I got all these notes on him. Honestly, I'm not going to break down his notes now, but I mean, it's like, I mean, yes, he's taken a big step up in competition, so it's like you take everything with a grain of salt when you watch people on the regional scene. But he has like this it thing going with him, where you're just like, his talent jumps off the page. Very aggressive, very fast, very exciting. On the feet, on the ground, slams, first round finishes, submissions. Like, this guy looks like he looks like a future top 15 guy for sure. So, and then Quarantillo, who's now out, has always been really good. I mean, even like his fight against Shane Burgos on his last fight was like a fun, entertaining fight. He's a really good guy. So, as far as this fight, bear with me a little bit as we really just got announced. So I kind of have the notes for both guys kind of in different directions. So I might be scrolling for a second and trying to delay a little bit. No, Herbert Burns, it's funny. So I was taking Ashkabov just because I was so amazed by his skills. But Herbert Burns is the kind of guy that I like too. I mean, on the feet, he's a serviceable striker, but he likes to brawl because, as you mentioned, he's a big guy who has some pretty good power, throws some hard body kicks. But if he closes the distance, he gets in the clinch, he's willing to grind on you, get some body lock takedowns, also has some decent entries, even pull guard. And the reason why he'll pull guard is because his BJJ is elite. It's amazing. He's an IBJJF medalist. I mean, that's how good he is. Amazing back takes, smothering top control. The one thing, and this is what got him in trouble in the past, is his gas tank. He can slow down. I mean, you look at what happened in the Danny Penne fight. He really slowed down Penne, put it on him, hit him with some really good shots. So you're worried about the damage he took in that fight. But all in all, his jiu-jitsu is so off the charts that he can be a tough test for anybody. Bill Algeo was a guy that I liked coming off the contender series. He's a long and lengthy striker, a really, really good striker, in my opinion. He's a pressure counter striker, a little unorthodox. He hangs his hands low, but he has really good movement, which he relies on, being that his hands are so low. Throws a lot of combinations. I love that he puts kicks into his punching combinations. Throws hard kicks. He'll throw a flying knee. some strong plum clinch, and that's due to his size. I mean, like I mentioned, he's a big, long, lengthy guy. He batters the bodies with knees really easily. He will look for some body lock takedowns inside. I hate that he could go for the head and arm throw, but he has a BJJ black belt. He will toss up some submissions from the bottom. If he doesn't get the submission, he uses the space to get back to his feet. But he's a weak defensive wrestler. He's been taken down 22 times in 5 UFC fights. And I mentioned this when I was watching like a tennis series. Instead of sprawling, this is the guy that'll like go for Kimuras, jump guillotines, which is really, really concerning. Now, it's hard to kind of put this fight together, like 5 minutes kind of head start. As much as I like Algeo, like I really like this guy, even though he doesn't have a good record in the UFC. I just think Burns is a terrible size league matchup, especially if Burns is and plays it smart. And what happened in the Pineda fight, getting caught, and kind of getting beat up. And some of that was from his own wrestling, tiring himself out. His throwing power at every shot will tire yourself out. But if he closes the distance, he should have his way on the ground with Algeo, and that's what I kind of think happens. Don't be surprised if it's one of these things where he banks 2 rounds and Algeo comes on strong in the third round and he hangs on, or even like we get a draw where Algeo gets a 10-8 round in the third round. But obviously, I'm not predicting a draw, which would be fun if we actually did do that once. But give me Burns. I want to say submission, but Algeo is a black belt. He's pretty slick. He's kind of a funk style wrestler, so I think he finds way out of it. But give me Burns in a pretty competitive decision.
All right. And I guess I didn't do it, but I might as well just do a quick introduction of these two gentlemen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just got
no. I didn't even think to, because I just figured we'd have a few minutes of free-form discussion. But Algeo, 33-year-old from Philadelphia, is 15-6 overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Dana White's Contender Series Season 2. He's the guy that lost the very infamous Brennan Loughnane fight where Loughnane shot a takedown on him in the last 30 seconds of a fight he was winning. Dana refused to sign Loughnane, saying, "We're looking for killers." Everyone remembers that moment. He's also a former ROC and would-be CFFC featherweight champ. He won the ROC title. He won the title fight in CFFC, but missed weight for it, so missed his chance. And Burns, 34-year-old Brazilian by way of South Florida. He is 11-3 overall. He is 2-1 in the UFC since joining out of the 3rd season of Dana White's Contender Series. 2-1. He's just 1-0 at featherweight, but he lost his last time out. That was the Daniel Pineda fight. And yeah, we don't have any odds on this thing yet. I agree that it's a bad matchup for Algeo in the sense that, Algeo is a black belt facing a much more credentialed black belt, like a literal, world-class grappler. But there's the sneaky other side of it. Algeo's 2 UFC wins over Spike Carlisle and Joe Anderson Brito, both of them a more skilled, more athletic fighter put it on him early, got tired, and Algeo took over. Like that was the story of both those fights. They were practically the same fight.
You might be convincing me again, brother.
If like Burns hasn't even made 145 in over 2 years. The Evan Dunham fight was at 150-pound catch weight. He blew weight by 5 full pounds for the Pineda fight and then gassed out and lost. If Burns doesn't tap out Algeo in the first round, it's Algeo all day. And I don't think he's going to. I think he's going to be like a house on fire early on. He's definitely faster on the feet than Algeo, has more pure power than he does. He doesn't quite have Gilbert Burns power, but he definitely has power. I think he should be able to get takedowns with ease. He'll go to work there. If he taps out Algeo in the first round, then I was wrong. And that to me is the second most likely outcome here. But I think he puts a walloping on Algeo in the first round and then Algeo takes over. I don't have any faith in Herbert Burns at 145 pounds or 149.5 past the first 6 minutes of a fight. So give me Bill Algeo in a rousing what I'm going to guess is going to be an upset. I think Burns is going to be a big favorite in this fight. Give me Algeo.
Let me ask you this. Comparing both guys, who, like, I would say we'd both say that Burns got an easier opponent.
Oh,
Would
yes.
would you say the same for Algeo? Because
Dude, Burns was a 3-1 underdog to Ashkabov.
I'm
Ashkabov
saying,
hadn't even fought in 2.5 years, and he
yeah.
was like minus 275, minus
Would you
285.
would you say the same for Algeo? That did he get an easier opponent or did he get a harder one?
I think he got an easier opponent. Again, Quarantillo was like minus 300 against him.
Oh wow. Yeah, I agree because Quarantillo obviously is a very wrestle heavy grapple style too, but obviously a much bigger gas tank. So yeah, I agree. I think they both got easier opponents.
Yeah. I mean, I like all four of these guys, but we lost the two that probably have the highest upside right now.
Yeah, I agree.
We head now to the light heavyweight division for a matchup between Dustin Jacoby and Jung. Jacoby, the 34-year-old Denver native, is 17-5-1 overall. He's 5-2-1 across two different stints with the UFC, but the first, I mean, they're separated by a decade. His first two fights in the UFC, he lost them both, but it was long enough ago that he lost them to Clifford Starks and Chris Camozzi. That's all you really need to know. Like, if you don't know who I'm talking about because you weren't even watching MMA yet, like, there you go. He went back to the regional scene.
You know those guys. Sorry to interrupt. You know those guys are where we're throwing like Terry Martin's name out there. We just
Yeah.
naming random middleweights, like both those guys.
Chris Camozzi, Clifford Starks. Yeah, exactly. Those are the names. He went and did exclusively kickboxing for about 5 years. He was a contender for Glory. He was a tournament winner. He like fought for a title in Glory. He got knocked out by Alex Pereira's left hook, just like Adesanya did. He was passing them out to everybody.
Sean Strickland.
Yeah. Anyway, since he's been back in the UFC, he is 5-0-1. His only blemish, if you want to call it that, a split draw with Iwan Kudalaba last May. Since then, he's bounced back with 3 more wins in a row over Darren Stewart, John Alan, and Michal Oleksiejczuk. Those 3, kind of fringe guys have propelled him to the point where we got to start looking to him as some sort of contender, and somebody who's going to meet him in the same place is Jung. The 28-year-old Korean is 15-2-1 overall. He's 4-1 in the UFC. Wins over Karas Ibragimov, Mike Rodriguez, William Knight, and Kennedy Nzechukwu, all sandwiched around a weird draw with Sam Alvey back in October of 2020. So, both of these guys really on the cusp of contention in the UFC light heavyweight division. Jacoby is the slight favorite to make the next step. He is minus 160. Jung is out there around minus 130 right now. Keith, these guys aren't very similar stylistically. They're not similar as fighters, but they're similar in that they've looked fantastic over the next couple of years, and they both have a really weird draw. Who gets it done?
Yeah. Yeah, I love this thing we got going on with Dustin Jacoby. Like, I love this turnaround. A guy that when his name I remember when his name came up on the contender series, it was like, wow, what a weird name to be on the card. But you mentioned Glory Kickboxing, very technical, and he's been really good. One of the best pure strikers in the division. High output, really good footwork. I like the things he does defensively. He avoids strikes by first moving out of the like completely moving with his feet, which is the best defense. And then his second defense is parrying punches and countering, which I think is the next best. So I love that he is constantly attacking, cutting different angles. One of the best jabs in the game. Follows it up with straight punches down the pipe. I like that he just touches and then he explodes when there's an opening. Some of the best calf kicks in the business. I mean, I know I'm a broken record when we talk about Dustin Jacoby's calf kicks. I always bring up the Justin Ledet fight. He beat Justin Ledet with just kicks, calf kicks, which is pretty impressive. He has a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, Ian Cutelaba turned him into a takedown dummy, but he showed in that fight that he's hard to get taken down. And again, I shouldn't say a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, that one guy was able to really put it on him. Jung, really underrated fighter. I'm glad that you said these nice things about him because he's a boxer with some pretty quick hands. He throws shots, hard shots down the pipe, surprising power. I mean, he starts Mike Rodriguez. He brutalized Kennedy and Njukwu with elbows inside. He will sneak in a takedown. I mean, he hit 8 takedowns against William Knight, who comes from a wrestling background and was easily taken down. He's got really good cardio. I mean, he was landing takedowns deep into fights, can go hard all 15 minutes. So Jung, he's an overachiever, but I love overachievers. Like there's something about that. They just stick with me. I wouldn't be surprised if he turns this into a wrestling match and he wins. And I really wanted to pick it, but I'm going to go with Jacoby just because of his movement, because of his hand speed. I expect him to land some jabs, maybe some calf kicks from distance. Plays it a little safe, probably trying to not engage with him too much. So John can't close the distance. Give me Jacoby by decision.
I'm with you here. I like both of these fighters as well. And in the condition that light heavyweight is in right now, both these guys might still have a top 10 run in them, regardless of who wins. But yeah, Jacoby's going to be a rough ask for Jung because Jung has fought taller guys with longer reach, but he was way quicker than Mike Rodriguez, and Kennedy Njukwu just doesn't use his height and reach very well defensively. Like he gets hit cleanly by shorter guys all the time. Jacoby, like you mentioned, he's tall and long. His jab and his low kick are his two best weapons, and he's got good footwork. I think it's going to be a bit of a frustrating night for Jung. I don't necessarily see a finish here. He's been incredibly hard to finish, but I do see Jacoby getting the better of the striking for 3 rounds here as well. We head now to the bantamweight division for a matchup between longtime contender Ricky Simón and undefeated up-and-comer Jack Shore. Simón, the 29-year-old Washington State native fighting out of Oregon, is 19-3 overall. He is 7-2 since joining the UFC as a former LFA bantamweight champ and as a veteran of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series, though he was not signed immediately. He is on a 4-fight win streak, those coming against Ray Borg, Gaetano Perello, Brian Kelleher, and Rafael Asuncao. Most recent of those, the Asuncao fight, was back in December at UFC Fight Night Lewis versus Dawkins, and he knocked him out about halfway through the second round. He will look to make it 5 straight and really mint himself a top 10 contender against Shore. The 27-year-old Welshman is a perfect 16-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He's a perfect 5-0 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Cage Warriors bantamweight champ. His wins have been over Noelin Hernandez, Aaron Phillips, Hunter Azure, Ludwig Shalinian, and most recently, Timur Valiev, whom he beat via unanimous decision at UFC Fight Night Volkov versus Aspinall back in March. Odds on this one are fairly close, but Shore is a moderate favorite. He's minus 165 right now. Simón plus 140 on the comeback. Keith, you're someone who is even out ahead of me on the idea that men's 135 might be the best division in the whole sport right now. And I usually disagree with you. I'm kind of like, well, I don't know if it edges out 45 or 55 yet. But when I realized that someone like Ricky Simón is basically a forgotten man in the division, I come back around and I go, you know what? Or that Jack Shore, who is 16-0 and has won 5 straight in the UFC, isn't already in top 5 matchups. I'm like, man, that is a long ladder to climb. Who do you see winning this one, and how do you see the fight going?
Yeah, just a quick point on 135. I feel like the only thing 135 is missing, they're missing the dominant champion at the top, like the other division has. And also that very marketable star that kind of really gets the casuals going. They don't have that. No matter Henry Cejudo's, apparently back. Maybe he's the guy. Maybe if Dillashaw can pull a championship, maybe he can kind of get some rub. If Aljamain Sterling continues to win, eventually he's got to get some respect. But as far as deep, it's insane. And then when this match, we looked at this match, the first thing that jumped out at me is like, why the hell is Ricky Simone versus Jack Shore so far down on the list? Like this fight should be second or third from the top.
Yeah.
And usually we always
Dude,
like
this would be a better headliner than some fight night headliners we've had this year.
yeah, exactly. And then you look at the fights on the card ahead of him, then I go, oh, Puna Soriano versus Dalcha Lungiambula is a really fun action fight. That fight shouldn't be ahead of it though,
No.
based on talent.
But
then I'm like,
if it weren't that, it would be an unranked heavyweight fight. Like that's what we have
yeah,
instead of an
exactly.
unranked
Yeah,
heavyweight fight
that's
because everyone thinks it's
exactly.
going to be a knockout.
Yeah. But then we have Miesha Tate, Lauren Murphy, dope fight. Shane Burgos versus Charles Jourdain, dope fight. Schnell versus Sumajari, dope fight. Li Jingliang versus Muslim Sakhalov, I like that. Michelle Waterson versus Amanda Lemos, like that. Brian Ortega, Yair Rodriguez. Then I'm like, oh, so other than maybe one spot, yeah, I get why it's where it is. Again, like I'm not saying like it shouldn't be higher, but it's I can't really complain that much when I normally would have. But back to the actual fight, it is a really, really fun matchup. A lot of questions will be answered, especially about the undefeated Jack Shaw, as this is his. Well, I don't know if it's his toughest test because Valiev is a really tough test, but Simone's a much bigger guy than Valiev. Simone's a classic wrestler boxer who's a plus athlete who's very physically strong guy. Fast hands. He does well to get in the pocket and unload some good power shots. Sets up a lot of his power shots with feints. I go back to the Ray Borg fight. Like I wrote this note a long time ago. He was freezing Ray Borg with feints. High output. I like that he attacks with combos. He's one of the guys who go downstairs and work the midsection before he sets up his power shots. He will eat a shot to land one back, which I don't like. Some of it has to do with just his lack of head movement, but he also has like a willing to brawl style. He does check leg kicks, which I like. He's a very good wrestler. He's got some good entries, smothering top control. When his opponent tries to get up, he stays glued on them, making them carry his weight. He understands the little things like that go a long way. He's not much of a submission threat, but when he does, and we talked about this about, he likes to wrestle submissions, your head and arm choke series. Move on to his opponent, Jack Shore. I've been on Jack Shore, I've seen forever, and I'm still on him. He's not a great athlete, but he's so intelligent. He knows what he's good at, and he just goes for it. He knows his best avenue to victory, and he puts himself in that avenue every fight. He is big for the weight class. He fights with a lot of pressure, snapping jab, tons of variety. It really, like, he's always tacking. He's never attacking with the same thing. It really reminds me of Alex Volkanovski. Now, I'm not saying he's the pound, he reminds me of the pound best fighter in the world. I'm just talking about this one thing he does, where he's always attacking, getting guessing. I like that he rips the body. He really showed that he's coming into his power in the Valiev fight. Like, he hurt Valiev on the feet. His kicking game has become very dangerous. Body kicks, calf kicks. He's a very good underrated wrestler. Good entries. He chains takedowns together well. Relentless to get the takedown. He has that mindset. He uses size to get inside, get some body lock entries, body lock takedowns. He's good at winning scramble. He has, I said this last time, he has this like Khabib thing in him where he understands the controlling of one single limb and keeping that pin before you move on, really smothering that way. Good back takes. He has 8 submission wins. So I'm really intrigued on who you're taking this fight because this is such an amazing fight. Ricky Simone is a really tough test for Jack Shaw, but I'm staying on Jack Shaw. I know he's going to put himself in the best position to win. I think that's going to be him forcing Simone back on his back foot. I think he's going to be the one, even though Simone's the more decorated wrestler, I think he's going to be the one who's going to be initiating takedowns, putting the wrestler on his back, making the wrestler defend takedowns where he wants to be in the offensive wrestling, but he said he's going to be defensive wrestling. I think it'll be a close fight, but give me Shaw by decision.
I love this fight. I think it's an extremely appropriate matchup for both guys. It's hard for me to believe that Ricky Simone is only 29 years old, just because it feels like he's been in the UFC for so long. Because he's one of those guys from the first season of the Contender Series, and just all those guys, kind of stick in your minds. But hell, that was only like 5 years ago. It's ironic that Ricky Simone's first UFC loss was to Uriah Faber, because he reminds me of an old school Team Alpha Male guy, like the Team Alpha, like the WEC era Team Alpha Male guys before they hooked up with Dwayne Ludwig. He's a explosive athlete, uh, very good wrestler, and everything runs off the wrestling and the aggression. Like high volume striker with a fairly basic repertoire of strikes. And just uses the takedown and the threat of the takedown to open other things up. Just so it's just kind of funny that he got sunned by Uriah Faber of all people. I'm with you, man. Like, this could be a trap fight for someone like Shore, a more athletic, faster guy who hits pretty hard and is a good offensive wrestler. But you keep bringing it back to the fact that Shore is so intelligent and so well coached. And that's the problem for me, is that when I envision the ways Simone wins this fight, they all involve Shore doing the wrong thing, either making a mistake or coming in with the wrong game plan. And I've not seen him do either of those things ever. So I'm with you. This should be a really fun fight. For a fight that I expect is going to feature a lot of wrestling, I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
You know who Jack Shore reminds me of? And I know we got to move on to those other fights. But his rise, and I'm not talking about the undefeated, and none of that. I mean, just his style of fighting. Mm-hmm. He reminds me a lot of Leon Edwards, where when you watch Leon Edwards, he doesn't like wow you. You don't jump off the page with his talent, but he just finds ways to win, always puts himself in the right position. And Jack Shore reminds me the same way.
Agreed. I was cage side when Leon Edwards beat Rafael dos Anjos, and I kind of had dos Anjos in that fight, and I was like, nope. All the ways that dos Anjos was going to win this fight involved Edwards not making the right choices, and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I'm with you here, and not all of Shore's fights are super exciting. He's like Edwards in that he does not owe you entertainment. Like some of his fights are a lot of fun, but not all of them are.
Yeah.
This one I think is going to be a lot of fun, especially for one that I think is going to involve a lot of wrestling.
Good scrambles.
I think it's going to be good scrambles. Simone, neither of us loves people just defending takedowns with guillotines, but Simone, another Team Alpha Male thing is that he has an actual front headlock series that he uses to threaten and defend and force scrambles.
They bummed her up fight.
Yeah, he shouldn't have won that fight, but he was doing the right thing.
Like, he put himself in position. He put himself in position to get like a controversial win.
Yeah, there you go. Because otherwise, he was his first UFC loss would have come much sooner, and Merab would already have had 2 title shots by now. But yeah, give me Shore by decision in a fun fight that is really, really going to get the talk cranking about when this guy is going to get into the title picture. Because he'll have, at that point, 2 wins in a row over top 10 level guys. Next up at UFC Long Island are the middleweights, as Punahele Soriano and Dalcha Lungiambula take the cage. Soriano, the 29-year-old Hawaiian by way of Las Vegas, is 8-2 overall. He is an even 2-2 since joining the UFC out of the third season of Dana White's Contender Series. However, he is on a 2-fight losing streak. He won his first 2 fights in the UFC by first-round knockout over Oscar Piechota and Dusko Todorovic. Since then, he's run into trouble against Brendan Allen and Nick Maximov. The most recent of those, the Maximov fight, was a split decision loss back in February at UFC Fight Night Hermanson versus Strickland. He's going to try to get things back on track against Lungiambula. The 34-year-old South African is 11-4 overall. Lungiambula 2-3 since joining the UFC as a former 2-division champ in EFC, the major African promotion. What you need to know about that is the 2 divisions were light heavyweight and heavyweight. And if you've ever seen Lungiambula, that should not surprise you at all, because the guy is on the William Knight level of being made out of a stack of bowling balls. He's on a 2-fight losing streak, same as Soriano, those being a decision loss to Marc-Andre Barriault. And then this March, he got guillotined by Cody Brundage late in the first round. Both men looking to snap 2-fight losing streaks. Soriano definitely the one more favored by Vegas to get it done. He is minus 250 right now. Lungiambula plus 210 on the comeback. I can understand why the odds are what they are. I would not feel comfortable betting anyone, like any unranked, middleweight as a 2.5 to 1 favorite over somebody who hits as hard as Lungiambula. That just seems really, really dangerous. But I see Soriano as a guy who's still on the come up. I mean, he still only has 10 fights in his career. I mean, he has tons of physical talent. He's with a great camp. I mean, he's parked at Extreme Couture with a lot of the other Hawaiian fighters who kind of relocated, like Dan Ige. I think people just still see upside in him because, yeah, he's run into trouble against the likes of Brendan Allen and Nick Maximov, but those are two very good middleweights, very good grapplers, and he wasn't completely out of his depth against them. He just wasn't quite enough for him now. Whereas Lungiambula is a guy who came in and with some very scary tools, still has those scary tools, but I feel as though we've kind of seen his ceiling here. He's not a good defensive wrestler. For as hard as he hits, he himself is quite hittable. He allows fights to be dictated to him. I mean, Marc-Andre Barrio probably would have been cut if he'd lost that fight to Lungiambula, but Lungiambula just let it become a Barrio fight. Barrio mashed him in the clinch, crowded him, just didn't keep his chin on the gunnery range where Lungiambula could, take his block off with any of his punches. I think this is Soriano's fight to win. Soriano is, I think, kind of an underrated offensive wrestler and willing to go to it and use it. I mean, in fact, you can argue that against Maximov, he wasn't the better wrestler. And then against Allen, just that wasn't a safety valve for him because then he's going to the ground with a long-limbed, good grappler. Lungiambula is not those things. If Soriano wants to hang out on the feet, he might be able to knock Lungiambula out. He might get knocked out himself. I think he's smart enough that he's not going to go there. I think we get about a half a round of a feeling out process, maybe a couple of interesting exchanges. I expect Soriano to try to take this thing to the ground in the first round. Once we're there, I think it's fish out of water time. Give me Soriano by ground and pound TKO late in the first.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the odds are off a little bit because of the power of Liam. I'm sure I struggle with his name. Lungiambula. I'm with you. Like, I wouldn't put money down on those odds, but yeah, I agree with a lot of things you just said about Soriano and his age. Like, he's good. I mean, he's well rounded. He's a southpaw that is a nice pocket boxer. He's got, even though he's a much smaller fighter, he does have some good power. He's pretty fast. He's pretty accurate. I go back to the Todorovic fight. Like, he was not missing his left hand. I like that he mixes kicks into his combos. He has a very similar style to Ricky Simon, where he's willing to eat a punch to land one of his own. But that's because he can crack and he trusts his chin more than he trusts his opponent's chin. You mentioned him being an underrated wrestler. Like, he's a former NCAA wrestler. I think he's a good wrestler. Mm-hmm. Quick entries, really drives to get to the second level, drives through the hips, some big slams. If he's in the clinch, he looks for foot sweeps. Strong ground and pound. Lungiambula, you mentioned, just a massive dude. He looks like a heavyweight. He's a good athlete, very explosive, crushing power, but he has low output, and that's because he's always looking to land the perfect strike to end the fight. He loads up at every shot, and this really tires him out. We see him gassed out against Ankalaev, against Perez. He gassed out. He makes a mistake of backing straight up, and he pairs his punches well, which I like, but he still backs up on the center line, which I don't like. He is a judo black belt. He has some throws and some trips, but if he's the one taken down, he really struggles to get back up. And the thing about him is we've seen him crumble when times get tough, and I really question his heart. Like, I think he might be a little bit of a front runner. Like, I wrote that down in my notes after his last fight. If it gets hard, he tends to check out when he's challenged. Lungiambula has the raw skills, but it's everything else that I'm worried about. I see both guys landing some big shots, but I see I'm struggling with this guy's name. Lungiambula slowing down.
You may not need to struggle with it much longer.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but every time he puts someone in the cut list, like later on, 3 months later, we're breaking down their fights again. But I think Soriano starts taking over. He gets when he gets tired. I think he might get some taken down, be on top, pin Lungiambula down, and I'm with you. I like to pick up the ground and pound. I'm going the same way. I'm going to say second round TKO with ground and pound.
There you go. Two pretty strong picks for Puna Soriano to make it so that Keith does not have to struggle to say Dalcha Lungiambula very much longer. Next up is what can only be described as a contenders match at women's flyweight, despite the fact that it's one of the women's debut in the division. It is Lauren Murphy versus Miesha Tate. Murphy, the 38-year-old who will be 39 in just a couple weeks, Alaskan by way of Houston, is 15-5 overall. She's 7-5 in the UFC. More impressive sounding than 7-5 is the fact that she is 6-2 since dropping the flyweight. The culmination of that, of course, was her unsuccessful title shot against Valentina Shevchenko last September at UFC 266, where she was game but overwhelmed on the way to a fourth round TKO. She is going to look to get things back on track against Tate, the former bantamweight champion, of course. 35-year-old out of Washington State is 19-8 overall. She is 6-5 in the UFC. Notably, she is 0-0 at flyweight. She disappeared from the sport after losing back-to-back fights to Amanda Nunes and Raquel Pennington. The Nunes fight, of course, where she lost her title, took off for about 5 years, was VP for one championship, basically out of nowhere, came back last summer, just announced her return, came back to modest expectations. Keith and I both talked about kind of how under-publicized it was. I think perhaps the UFC just being cautious about it, not knowing what her plans were or how she'd look. Turns out she looked fantastic. Knocked out Marion Renault in the third round in such a way that made her a person of interest immediately in the bantamweight division. That interest waned when she came back in November and lost to Ketlin Vieira in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 198. Tate apparently saw some writing on the wall there, decided to drop to 125 pounds, and the test run for that is going to come against an immediately previous title challenger in Murphy. Kind of an interesting deep end of the pool she's being thrown into. Nonetheless, she is the favorite. She's minus 175, Murphy plus 150 as the underdog. Keith, I see this as a battle of unknowns. I'm going to throw it to you, but to me, it is Murphy's age. Again, she's going to be 39 a couple weeks after this fight, and the question of her motivation level after she kind of reached the pinnacle, got the title shot she'd asked for years, and was proven definitively, not up to the task. Her age and her motivation against Tate's ability to cut an extra 10 pounds of weight in her mid to late 30s. Who gets it done here, and how does this fight look?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever a good idea to be dropping down a weight this late, but Miesha Tate is such a professional. Like, I have no doubt that she makes the weight. Let me ask you this. Miesha Tate keeps talking about, with a win, getting a title shot. She expects the UFC to do their matchup. Do you agree that she wins and she gets a title shot?
Actually, I do think she will. If she wins in uncontroversial, one-sided fashion, she gets a title shot.
So let me ask you this question. If you think she wins and she doesn't deserve it after one win in the division, but if you're the UFC and you're going to give her a title shot after one win, why even have her fight Lauren Murphy? Why not just go right to the title shot?
Maybe. Well, for one thing, I could see Tate requesting something like this. I want a test case fight.
Fair enough. That's true. She probably would have.
You're confident she's going to make the weight? Maybe she isn't. Maybe she wants a test cut before she has to do it against the best fighter in the world.
Yeah, it could. And it might be something, she wants to see what she feels like before she moves right to the title. But I mean, if those aren't factors, like, she doesn't deserve it, but that hasn't stopped the UFC before. And does anybody, the hardcores are not going to be happy even with one win for Miesha Tate to get a title shot, but the casuals aren't going to care. So you can make it without even, you could have gave Miesha Tate a title shot, her return fight back from the UFC, and a lot of people wouldn't have cared. Now, who's going to win this one? This is a tough test. No, I love Miesha Tate as a person. Like, I interviewed her. I'm only bringing this up because you said there wasn't a lot of press on her return. Yeah, because I interviewed her about 3 days before it was announced, and I joked about her coming back out of retirement. And she didn't want to break the story with me. So Jesus. Anyways, she's one of the best interviews I've ever done. That said, I've never been that high on her as a talent. Now, she looked amazing against Marinell. She looked fast, good output. She was throwing combinations. But against Ketlin Vieira, like, she looked much different. She looked not Ketlin Vieira. I'm sorry.
No, it was Ketlin Vieira.
It was Ketlin Vieira. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm mixing up my bantamweights for a second. Yeah, she looked slow. She did have good output, which I did like, but no power. And dropping down, I don't expect her to have more power at 125. But what's concerning to me is she wasn't reacting to shots well. Like, she was getting hurt on the feet a little bit for my liking. Now, I like that she still attacks the body. I like that she can close the distance. She'll grind the clinch. She has some really good entries. She's not explosive, but she's relentless to get to the ground. She cuts angles well. She took down Vieira even in a fight that she clearly lost. But she's got some strong control. She's got some good back takes. She got 7 submission wins. I mentioned the last time she won the UFC title with a submission. Lauren Murphy, she's a minus athlete, but she's just like tough. Now, she isn't fast, but she fights at a really good pace. She can take a beating and keep on working. She's pretty technical boxer, good jab. She gets inside and she throws some power shots. I think she has got underrated power. She sits on her punches. She's good at moving, and then if she's not moving forward, she's good at moving and pulling her opponent into her right hand, her power punches. Because of her boxing style, she doesn't check many leg kicks, so that's a big target. She's good in the clinch, but she's good in the clinch. But she's not a wrestler, but she's smart enough to sneak a takedown in to win a round. I say she has okay top control, and I'd say average takedown defense. Like, nothing's, she's not Jose Aldo out there. So to me, this fight comes down to if Tate can take down Murphy. You did add an intriguing factor of how motivated is Murphy, because I didn't really think about that. Being that you're up there in age. I mean, she's a mother. She's 39. They're about to turn 39. So she's at a place where, I mean, she could just fall off regardless of how motivated she is. She could just fall off overnight. But also, like, to get all the way there and have your dream crushed, and it's hard to wake up and put in that extra work, and especially being that her style is to fight at such a high pace. Now, of course, we're speculating. We have no idea. But if the fight stays on the feet and Tate can't take it down, this could be a pretty exciting fight. And I think it could be a really close fight. But I'm going to say Murphy and her output and her power, I think she hits harder. I'm going to take Murphy by split decision.
100% on board with you here. I was wondering which way you go on this one. Like, you made a good point that Murphy's not, she's a minus athlete, and I almost interjected and said the same thing I said when you said that about Court McGee. Like, no, she was a minus athlete when she was 30.
Yeah, that's true.
At
That's
pushing
true.
40, like, it's like minus.
Yeah, that's true.
But one thing she has is she's pretty good sized and physically strong for the weight class. And yeah, I don't think
she is. Lauren Murphy is like, she's the one who like rides her bike to the bus stop. She struggles to ride the bike, like going down the hills and stuff. Like, she's coming down the hills, but like putting the bike on the front of like the bike rack, like no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like picks it right up. Yeah.
I mean, what a great story. I mean, you mentioned she has kids. Yeah, she has kids that are like almost 20. Like, she started training to get back into shape after having kids, and just funny that was a path for her to like be at least in the team picture for the best in the world at what she does for a brief moment. Like, that's fantastic. But Tate, even if like she nails the weight cut and she's as good 125-pound Tate as she can be, I don't think the takedowns are a given here. Like, I don't think when they get their hands on each other, when they clinch, and they probably will, I don't think she's going to necessarily be the stronger woman there. And just like you said, if Tate can't get Murphy down, she's going to get the worst of a boxing match for 3 rounds. And that's kind of what I expect to happen. Now, Tate is one of the rare women wrestlers in MMA that is not dependent on trips and throws from the clinch. Like, she actually will shoot from outside.
but I don't know that she's like shooting a blast double through Murphy's hips or anything like that. Give me Murphy to win a decision as well, and keep her run going, and kind of it'll be interesting to see what Tate does or does not after hitting a roadblock in both of these divisions.
I always think of Lauren Murphy. I always remember when she was on the comeback Ultimate Fighter season, and I think it was Eddie Alvarez was coaching her, and he kept calling her Barb as in Barb Honchak. He kept messing up her name, and she's like, "My name's Lauren."
We head to the men's featherweight division for, I would say pencil it in for fight of the night, except you can say that about pretty much every fight between now and the end of the card. But this one should be a banger. It is Shane Burgos versus Charles Jourdain. Burgos, the 31-year-old New Yorker, is 14-3 overall. He's 7-3 in the UFC. He is coming off a win. He took a unanimous decision over Billy Quarantillo at UFC 268 last November. That snapped his first losing streak of any kind as a professional, as he lost back-to-back fights to Josh Emmett and Edson Barboza. He'll try to keep things going against Jourdain. The 26-year-old from Quebec is 13-4-1 overall. He's 4-3-1 since joining the UFC as a former two-division champ from TKO, one of Canada's premier promotions. He is on a 2-fight win streak, those being over Andre Ewell and Lando Venata. Most recent of those, the Venata fight, was a first-round guillotine choke submission back in April at UFC Fight Night Lemos versus Andrade. Despite Jourdain's highlight reel finish and positive momentum, he is a pretty good underdog here. Burgos minus 200, Jourdain plus 170. Keith, should be a fun one while it lasts. Who you got?
Yeah, this is a really good one. Man, I know we're gonna be entertained. That's for damn sure. Burgos, he cannot be in a boring fight. I mean, he's this big featherweight who just marches down his foe with really high output, quick hands. He throws a snapping jab. He follows that jab right into the pocket where he can unload big shots. He has some of the best body work you'll see. He has that mentality, work low, then work your way up. He hits really hard. He has some good calf kicks too. The negatives are he keeps his hands low, and his head movement isn't nearly as good as the commentary team's going to make him sound like. They make him sound like he has this great slip and rip style, but he really doesn't slip a lot. He eats a lot. I mean, Josh Emmett beat him up a lot. Edson Barboza beat him up some shots. Even, and I know I always break this down when I talk about Shane Burgos, was really long time ago, but he even got hurt by Kurt Hallbaugh in that fight. His wrestling is pretty much non-existent. You'll never see him really go for takedowns. He has been taken down a little bit, but he will work with submissions and kind of work off his back and kind of get back up. Now, Jourdain is an explosive fighter, fights at a really high pace. He's athletic. He's fast. He can fight out of both stances, sharp left hand. He loves his lead uppercut, which, I don't like. I love, and I know this 2 fights in a row I brought this up for him. I love the Andre Ewell fight. I love the adjustment he made in the Ewell fight. Like, he didn't like being pressed by Ewell, and Ewell was kind of picking him apart. He lost the first round and then just became this aggressor and said, that's it. He can't match my pace. He can't match my toughness. And he goes full, this is Sparta moment to end the fight. Those flying knees, has some hard kicks, especially to the body. He can overthrow his shots, which is concerning and kind of leads him to get tagged. But that kind of goes with the territory, the way he's going to fight. You kind of have to. You kind of have to take the good with the bad. He also can forget defense at times, eat shot. Very Shane Burgos-ish. If they weren't fighting each other, I'd kind of say the same thing, like eat a shot to land one of his own. But he has the cardio to back it up. I think he's an underrated grappler. He is a submission threat. He has 4 career submissions. He constantly likes working for guillotines. He did against Kulabau. He caught Lando Venata in a submission. He's good to get back up. He was put on his back. But in fairness, he was subbed by Julian Erosa recently, so that's a little bit concerning. This fight is going to be absolute nuts, bonkers, whatever you want to say. Jourdain is the more explosive fighter, but I think Burgos is the better pure boxer. I think both guys got to have their moments, but give me the inside striking of Burgos, especially going down to the body. I think he should take over. Give me Burgos by decision.
Awesome. Thank you. Considering how hittable Burgos is and like how he gets caught clean a couple times, even in his wins, in picking Burgos, I am worried for him just to eat a flying knee or something spinning or, like you mentioned, a lead uppercut, which seems like a terrible idea, except for the times it works. Burgos has problems in the UFC because he seems to have settled into the role of the reliable action fighter who comes up a little short when he meets an actual top 10 guy. Like that's who's beating him. Calvin Kattar, Josh Emmett, Edson Barboza. And I mean, I like that you mentioned that his slip and rip is more of a get hit and then rip because that was the difference between him and Kattar. Two guys with broadly the same skill set, but Cater's head movement was better. And so just Burgos ate more shots, and eventually went down. Emmett beat Burgos without really needing to use his wrestling. He just hit him with greater power. Like for a guy who's as good an offensive boxer as Burgos is, Emmett should not have been catching him cleanly that often.
Yeah, but in fairness, Josh Emmett's wrestling is gone. He has
by the time they fought, yeah.
He has wrestling forever. Yeah.
Most alarming, I was there cage side when he fought Edson Barboza. I actually had Burgos in that fight, and he was doing fine until Barboza hit him with something that was like a trank dart. Like Burgos looked around for about 5 full seconds and then went down. That is worrisome against a guy who throws as many shots from different angles as Jourdain does and has plus power on just about everything. Like he's not, like a death dealer on the feet, but he comes up with a lot of unexpected stuff that hits from weird angles. And I swear some of his knockouts have been by surprise, like as much as concussion. Having said all that, I do favor Burgos to avoid the kill shot, get the better of Jourdain on the feet. If they get into a scramble, that's another avenue for Jourdain to win. I'm really talking myself out of this Burgos pick, like in real time here. You know what?
Do it, brother.
Shane Burgos is probably a better overall fighter than Charles Jourdain. He is done respectably against better competition, but he leaves too many openings for his opponents to get their best weapons in against him. Give me Charles Jourdain by second round stoppage. I mean, I'm gonna say TKO, but if like they fall into something on the ground and Jourdain taps him, that wouldn't surprise me either. There, I just talked myself into a 2-1 upset pick.
There you go. Hey, I changed my pick in this card, so I'm glad that you did the same.
We head now to the men's flyweight division for a matchup between Matt Schnell and Mudaerji. Schnell, the 32-year-old Louisiana native born in Texas, is 15-6 with 1 no contest overall. He's 5-4 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He's 4-3 in the UFC at flyweight. He did lose his most recent timeout. It was a guillotine choke submission by Brandon Royval at UFC 274. That is probably the shortest fight you'll ever see win fight of the night in the UFC. 2 minutes and 14 seconds was all it took to get those gentlemen an extra $50,000 each. He goes in against Mudaerji. The 26-year-old Tibetan is 16-4 overall. He's 3-1 in the UFC. He is 2-0 since dropping to flyweight. He is on a 3-fight win streak, those being against Andrei Sukumtat, Malcolm Gordon, and Zaruk Adashev. The most recent of those, the Adashev fight, was at UFC on ESPN, Chiesa versus Magny, all the way back last January. So this will be his first time in the cage in a little over 18 months. Nonetheless, or notwithstanding that long layoff, he is the comfortable favorite. He's minus 240, Schnell plus 200 as the underdog. Keith, two guys that still have a little bit of a prospect feel, even though Schnell's been in the UFC for like 10 fights now, 11 fights. Who gets it done here? Who wins?
Yeah, this is another exciting fight. I should say that for every fight. Like, this is a really good card. And I love the placement of flyweights high on the card. You mentioned it. Matt Schnell's good, man. He's a well-rounded fighter. He's a pressure striker, good output. He uses feints to really set up his power shots. He gets in the pocket, and he likes to throw down, bite down his mouthpiece. a bit of a brawl. He's got some really nice pop, and he just continues to add guys that he's hurt to the list over and over. As he's hurt Bontarine, he's hurt Pantoja, he hurt Tyson Nam. But I'm a little worried about his chin because that style of brawl, he gets starched a little bit himself. He's a good grappler. He's got 8 submission wins. He loves like head attacks, darce chokes, guillotines. He's also, well, if you take him down, he'll throw up submissions from his back. He does use his submission attempts to get, create a space to get back up to his feet. He has been plunked a couple times. That's what I mentioned about his chin. I mean, he was almost knocked out by Brandon Royval in the last fight, but he also hurt Brandon Royval, and that's why we had a fight of the night. Now, Mudaerji, he's been out for a while, so it's a little hard to understand who he is, but he's at that age where you expect him to make big improvements from fight to fight. And what we last seen of him, he looked really good. I mean, southpaw, who's very technically sound. He's fast. He uses footwork well. He has a very taekwondo, karate type style, traditional martial arts style. Kind of bladed stance, but he's really good at like getting in, getting out, landing without getting hit. Chris jab has his straight right. I mean, should be a straight left is like a piston. He's really good at beating his opponents to the point of attack and just picking up their timing. He's really coming into his power, and being that he's now 26, he should have more. But we saw it, showed his power recently against Malcolm Gordon. He has some really slick kicks, throws from everywhere. He's like that. I said last time, he has like that Stephen Thompson hook kick where he likes to throw behind his everything. His punches from the right side, throws that like hook kick. He hasn't shown much in the wrestling department, but once someone's have taken him down, he's kind of won a scramble. He's got some really good ground and pound. Now, this is another dope fight. I think this fight should be a pick 'em. Like, I think the lines are way off. I think the lines are really disrespecting the guy like Schnell, who's really dangerous, one of the hardest hitters in the division. And Mudaerji is taking a big step up in competition. Going, Andre Sukmatut, Malcolm Gordon,
Darashev.
Darashev to match now. That's a big step up in competition. Now, I like both of these guys. I think both guys are gonna have moments in the fight, but I think Mudaerji is going to pass the test. He's just now reaching his prime years. I think he lands the better shots. I like a lot of Snell's offensive tools, but I'm really worried about that chin. He's been in some wars, and Mudaerji did show that he can crack. I'm gonna say he does it. I'm gonna take Mudaerji by second round TKO.
Man, Matt Schnell cannot catch a break. Like, he is one of the best 500 fighters in the UFC. Like, talking about his UFC record being, about 500.
The flyweight Stoltz.
Yes, it really is. I mean, and we're talking about a guy who debuted in the UFC on short notice at bantamweight against Rob Font. Like, just it's brutal. He has so many good tools. Obviously, he's consistently in exciting fights. He is a big flyweight. Like, I know like the dimensions he's listed at by the UFC and by the Sherdog Fight Finder, but I've been face to face with the guy a few times. He's a big flyweight. Like, he's almost my height. His shoulders are about as wide as mine. I'm just like, dude, how do you weigh 125 pounds? And of course, the answer is with great difficulty. That's been a problem for him in the past.
Yes, talking to me in French fries, like, dude, how do you make weight?
For me, the unknown here obviously is the long layoff for Mudaerji. And as you like to point out, he's at an age where if the fighter has the talent and is properly motivated and is with the right camp, that kind of time off can almost be a blessing in disguise. They can come back with whole new tools in the bag that, they wouldn't have if you're doing, purposeful fight camps 3 or 4 times a year. Expecting that Mudaerji is going to come back at least as good as he was, if not better. I do favor him to beat Schnell here. I think he's going to be the longer striker on the feet, even though I just said Schnell's a big guy. Mudaerji has long arms and legs and throws a lot of straight strikes. Interested to see what happens if it hits the ground, but I don't think that's going to be the bulk of the fight. I think what we're going to see is Mudaerji win a really fun, high-paced kickboxing match, winning at least 2 out of 3 rounds. Third from the top at UFC Long Island, at least as the card is currently constructed, is a welterweight matchup between Li Jingliang and Muslim Salikhov. Li, the 34-year-old from Western China, is 18-7 overall.
He's 10-5 in the UFC. He did lose his last time out, but hey, he was the guy that was willing to step up and fight Khamzat Chimaev. For his trouble, he got choked out in the first round, but that was last October, UFC 267. Prior to that, he knocked out Santiago Ponzinibbio at UFC on ABC 1 all the way back last January. Lee will be facing Salikhov. The 38-year-old Dagestani is 18-2 overall. He is 5-1 in the UFC. He debuted, got tapped out by Alex Garcia all the way back in November of 2017. Since then, he's won 5 straight, those being Ricky Rainey, Nordine Taleb, Laureano Staropoli, Eliseu Capoeira dos Santos, and most recently, Francisco Trinaldo, whom he beat last June at UFC Fight Night Rosenstrike versus Sakai. He'll try to make it 6 straight, which, I mean, even at welterweight, 6 straight, got to get you some kind of attention. And he is slightly favored to do so. Minus 170, Lee plus 145 on the comeback. I've got to say, I'm surprised at the level of confidence in a 38-year-old welterweight who hasn't fought in over a year. And his defining feature kind of his UFC run has been long layoffs and injuries and weird stuff happening to him. On paper, he's had a very appropriate progression in challenges. You took on guys like Ricky Rainey and Nordine Taleb that were kind of mid to low level guys, moved up to Laureano Staropoli, who at the time was a well-regarded prospect. And then Eliseu Capoeira and Francisco Trinaldo are both the kind of guys that you need to beat to get kind of onto the edges of the top 15 in the UFC. Like, if all those 5 fights had happened over the course of 18 or 24 months, he'd be an obvious fringe contender. But because they've been stretched out over 5 years, and he's now 38, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in this. Like, he throws a lot of spinning exotic stuff. I understand why they call him the king of kung fu, but I don't see how he's like almost a 2-1 favorite over Li Jingliang here. Talk me off the cliff, because the guys that have beaten Li Jingliang are at a higher level than Muslim Salikhov has shown us so far.
Yeah. Are you picking Li Jingliang?
I am. I think I know what Li Jingliang is. Like, unless Khamzat Chimaev like actually killed his brain by choking him all the way to sleep.
He might have.
If he's essentially the same guy he was 8 or 9 months ago.
It's funny you say that, because to me, Li Jingliang has been very inconsistent. Now, I was thinking about like writing new things and kind of organizing my thoughts on Li Jingliang, but a lot of times what I do is I kind of have my notes and I like re-look at my notes and I watch like the last fight or more recent fight and see what changed. But then I'm like, I just completely ignore the Chimaev fight, because that's just a different animal. Like, he got his ass whooped. Like, that's what happens when you fight Chimaev. That's what 99% of welterweights, that's going to happen to him. So I kind of really copied my last notes heading into that. And it was that he's too inconsistent for me. I mean, he looks incredible against Oleski Dos Santos.
Yep.
And then he looked terrible against Neil Magny. Now, I think he's good. I mean, he looked really good against Santiago Ponzinibbio. But he just struggled with the size, the length, the IQ of Magny, the ultimate pressure. Now, that's a lot of things that Magny does so well, and a lot of guys struggle with that, and Magny fights much different than Salikhov does. Now, on the feet, I'd say Li Jingliang is a serviceable boxer, a lot of hooks, good head movement. He hits pretty hard. Good leg kicks. I'd say he's an underrated offensive wrestler, weaker defensive wrestler. Obviously, Magny took him down, so did Jake Matthews. But he's got pretty good cardio, which I like. He seems like a little bit of a gamer. Salikhov, you mentioned it. Like, I hate that Salikhov is 38. It gives me like so much pause on this guy. But to me, the eyeball test is there. Again, as you mentioned, he hasn't fought in such a long time that we don't know it's there. But I can only go off what I last saw. Good movement, nice power. I mean, he starts Nordine Taleb. He sits on his punches. He's got good head movement. He's really good slip and rip off the center line. Kind of keep himself in position to land his own shots. He's really good at picking up his opponent's timing. He has some of the best kicks in the game. Kicks everywhere. He also checks kicks. He has those, as you mentioned, the spinning attacks. He has a very like Alexander Slamenko style to him.
Yeah.
Where he just throws those. Sometimes he throws spinning attacks for no reason. I think he's an underrated wrestler, though. He has 5 takedowns in his last 3 fights. Pretty good reactionary double. He kind of seems like he's understanding that adding wrestling to his game just makes him a better all-around martial artist, and it'll actually open up his striking. Yeah, I like that he'll actually even catch a kick and just kind of run you through. But he needs to improve on his ground control. Like he struggles to keep guys down. Now, this is another intriguing fight. I think both fighters have some serious question marks. I am really worried about picking Salikhov, but just the eyeball test, I think he's the better fighter. So I really like his kicking game. He probably has the edge in wrestling too. So give me Salikhov by decision.
There you go. A little bit of disagreement in another fight with all kinds of question marks hanging over it. With that, we come to the co-main event of UFC Long Island, a strawweight matchup between Michelle Waterson and Amanda Lemos, because a matchup between a former atomweight champ and a former bantamweight champ is something that should be allowed. Waterson, the 36-year-old Hawaiian by way of New Mexico, is 18-9 overall. She is 6-5 since joining the UFC as the newly dethroned Invicta atomweight champ. She won the atomweight title, lost it to Erica Tiburcio in one of the biggest upsets that year. Jumped to the UFC and into the strawweight division. She did lose her last time out. It was a pretty one-sided loss to Marina Rodriguez and the headliner of UFC on ESPN 24 last May. She'll look to get back on track against Lemos. The 35-year-old from northern Brazil is 11-2-1 overall. She's 5-2 since joining the UFC as the former Jungle Fight bantamweight champ. She is 5-1 at strawweight. She joined the UFC as a bantamweight, lost to Leslie Smith in her debut, promptly dropped all the way to strawweight because there was no flyweight division at the time, and she's gone 5-1 since then. She put 5 fights in a row together and probably had a title shot on the line when she ran into Jessica Andrade in April in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 205. She got arm triangled in the first round by what I consider to be basically a more evolved version of herself. But nonetheless, she is the biggest favorite on the card. Lemos minus 450, Waterson plus 350. To me, Michelle Waterson is a super overachiever. She's an obviously undersized 115 pounder, which makes it interesting that honestly, she's at the UFC level, and frankly, even at the Invicta level, she's kind of the wrestling hottie. She has the tools. Like if you see her at an open workout, she's dazzling. Like she'll throw like butterfly kicks and do 360 spin stuff and like handstand, like cartwheel kicks and stuff, just, to kind of like have fun. But in the cage, she's a grinder who forces the clinch and gets takedowns against larger women. That's what she does. When those women cannot be bullied by her, things get really ugly. She either just gets chopped up if it's someone like Ioane Jędrzejczyk that she can't get inside on, like Marina Rodriguez that she can't really get inside on, or if it's someone who's just stronger and a better wrestler than she is, like Carla Esparza, it turns into an ugly fight that she loses. This is going to be poison for her. I mean, Amanda Lemos, to me, she really is kind of like a less evolved Jessica Andrade. She's a little taller than Andrade, but it's the same thing where she looked undersized for a bantamweight, but she filled it out with muscle. At 115, she's an absolute tank, and everything she does runs off of decent to plus athleticism and off the chart strength. I don't see any safe place for Waterson here. If they want to stay on the feet, it'll be Waterson's pot shot striking. And the thing is, like, she doesn't have a ton of power, and when she is on the feet, she's not very high volume most of the time these days, especially as she's gotten into her late 30s. So Waterson will just be kind of pot shotting single shots with someone who has a lot more power than she does. Or if it does go into the clinch, I think Lemos is going to ragdoll Waterson. This is going to be ugly. And I understand why Lemos is as big a favorite as she is, because even if she makes a mistake, Waterson doesn't really have the skill set to make her pay for that mistake in a fight ending way. Like, she could make a few mistakes and still win this thing easily.
I expect her to do so. Give me Lemos. Waterson is super game. Give me Lemos by second round TKO on the ground.
Yeah, hopefully if Waterson loses, she doesn't get cut, because I can see the PFL picking her up and just throwing her in there against Kayla Harrison next.
Don't even wish that into existence, because then you'll have
She
more.
might be Kayla's toughest match. I can see it, like, I can use losing her speed and running around a little bit, throwing some karate kicks out there, those little Holly Holm push kicks.
A little look behind. Or let's go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that's how I should just break down Michelle Waterson right now, just comparing what she could do to Kayla Harrison.
A little look behind the curtain for those of you watching. Keith and I are both on the Sherdog rankings panel. We're two of the more active participants. And right now, Kayla Harrison is on our women's top 15 pound for pound list. She's like 14th or 15th. Yeah. And there's an argument there, because she's reigning over a miserable division that basically isn't even a division. It's a bunch of bantamweights that they sent to the buffet. But she's looked so dominant in doing so that, yeah, there's a case for both. I'm one of the ones who's against it. Keith is for it. But if Waterson goes over there, then she'll have the ammunition she needs. It's like, see, I mean, yeah, it was an atom weight, but it was a really good atom weight, and I don't need that shit.
Yeah, former top 15, top 10 ranked strawweight. No, I'm on the Kayla Harrison, because to me she's the exception to the rule. That's it. Just usually you have to go by who you beat. Every once in a while there's exceptions to the rule, and I'm a huge Kayla Harrison fan. Even though she's fighting, she's gonna fight Larissa Pacheco again. Michelle Waterson. Michelle Waterson, she's an all the way out or all the way in fighter. She likes to use a lot of footwork, kind of keep her space. She has those like Holly Holmes side kicks to keep her space. She likes to play the cat and mouse game and have play the mouse and have the cat kind of chase her to kind of run into her own counter shots. She'll suddenly crash the parquet and unload some shots. She has some kicking is the best part of her striking game. She's got this great dexterity where she throws some hook kicks, oblique kicks. But as you mentioned, despite being very undersized, she's good in the clinch. I mean, she has some success against Jourdain and Jacek in the clinch. She beat up Karolina Kovacevic in the clinch. Felice Herrig she beat up in the clinch. That's kind of her area. She has some good judo. She has a good judo background, so she has some good trips. She is like, we talk about fighters going for the headlock, the head and arm throw, they like to say, but wrestlers would just call it the headlock. She's like the queen of it. She's the one that always goes for the headlock. Good top control though. If she gets the fight to the ground, good back takes. I mean, she had a pretty prime Young Jacek's back in their fight. But she's also like incredibly tough, like you mentioned. Like I could tell that you probably want to take an early first round stoppage, but based on Michelle Waterson's toughness, seemed like you want to extend it out.
That is exactly what I was thinking.
But what worries me about her is that she's 36. She hasn't fought in years, and I feel like she knows that she'll never be a champion. Like she had that run where it seemed like she was kind of going up the rankings, and she was talking about being like the mom champion and all this. That obviously failed, and she's way behind. I wonder what her motivation is. Now, Amanda Lemos, yeah, she was overwhelmed by Jessica Andrade, but Jessica Andrade has done that to so many fighters. And if you go before that, Lemos really looks like a fighter that's coming into her own. She's one of the best athletes in the division. She can fight at both stances. She's fast. She tends to throw her hands from her waist, which is risky defensively, but on the flip side, it's hard to see it coming, which is the advantage. She has one of the best jabs in the game. She uses her feints really well to set up her power shots. When there's an open, she explodes with shots, and that's because she kind of keeps her legs underneath her, keeping her position to really gain some power. Really tight inside hooks. I'd say she's one of the better, like more powerful hitters in the division. Beautiful kicks. Calf kicks are great. Her plum clinch is mean. I mean, she smashed up Levana Souza inside the clinch, landed some nasty, nasty elbows. She can grapple. She also has like a judo background, nice throws, good ground and pound, mean ground and pound. I'm with you, man. This looks like a passing of the torch fight. I'm all in on Lemos. Waterson is tricky. She's smart. Similar to what we talked about, Jack Shaw, she'll give herself the best opportunity to win, but Lemos is too fast, too explosive. Waterson can be beaten. I'm sorry, she can be taken down. She can get beat up. She's really tough. I kind of feel the same way like you are. Like I want to take a stoppage, but I'm going to extend it out even more. And I'm actually say Lemos wins the decision, but I think it's going to be a blowout. I think we make it like 10-8 rounds. I think she's going to batter Michelle Waterson for 15 minutes.
That brings us to the main event of UFC on ABC 3, a featherweight matchup between top contenders Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez. Ortega, the 31-year-old from Torrance, California, is 15-2 with 1 no contest overall. He's 7-2 with 1 no contest in the UFC. Coming off a loss in his last outing, it was a 5-round unanimous decision loss to Alexander Volkanovski. He'll be facing Rodriguez. The 29-year-old Mexican is 13-3 with 1 no contest overall. He's 8-2 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC out of the first season of Tough Latin America. He did lose his last time out. It was a unanimous decision loss to Max Holloway in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 197 last November. That was the fight that stamped Holloway's passport to the trilogy with Volkanovski. The two of them meet here, and honestly, the stakes could not be much higher. In a division with as many up-and-comers, with as many undefeated up-and-comers, there are like 3 guys knocking on the top 10 that are literally undefeated in their careers. With all those guys coming up, the winner of this fight is in the title picture, and the loser takes a huge step back. It's about as high a stakes as you can think of for a fight night. Odds are close, but Ortega is the slight to moderate favorite. He's out around minus 155, 160, most of your outlets. Rodriguez about plus 130, plus 135 on the comeback. Keith, this is, like I said, it's about as good as you can get for a fight night main event, not only because it's high stakes, but because this is probably going to be a pretty exciting fight. There aren't many bad Ortega or Rodriguez fights. Who do you see winning this one?
Yeah, it's really exciting. And the two of the more marketable guys in the division. I mean, you have Brian Ortega, who kind of the UFC's trying to been working him. He kind of gathers the like American Hispanic market, while obviously Yair Rodriguez has that the true Mexican market. Yeah. Born and raised in Mexico.
Ortega is the only American UFC fighter who has a Modelo sponsorship that is not a champ.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's a good-looking guy. He's fun, exciting. He has that Hispanic background. He's extremely marketable. That said, being that both guys are marketable, I'm assuming the UFC would want Yair Rodriguez to win because obviously his style, but also he hasn't fought the champion.
Yes.
And if they do the Josh Emmett fight, which is the fight they should do, if they do Josh Emmett gets hurt, I'm assuming the next phone call would be Yair Rodriguez. If he beats Ortega,
yes. I'm 100% with you on that. Whereas the opposite might not be true just because Ortega fought Volkanovski so recently.
Now you're probably going down to, I don't know, Arnold Allen. I mean, I don't know what would be next.
Well, I mean, then you get down to those undefeated guys. Like, does Allen or Evloev get the call as just the undefeated phenom? I mean, would it be weirder than John Jones getting the short notice call to fight Shogun, where you're like, yeah, we all can tell he's probably going to be a champ sometime, but is now too soon. Yeah.
Who knows? No, that's a good point. Yeah. So as far as this fight, you mentioned one thing you've said a couple of times, like, oh, this is fight of the night, this fight of the night. It might be hard to beat the main event because, one, obviously the higher up the card, the chances you are, but the things these guys can do is just so exciting. Brian Ortega is a guy that we always sort of fight for the title, but he was, I guess you could say Max Holloway in the second fight against Volkanovski, but I'm saying like he was pretty close to catching Volkanovski, and that's what he is. Now he's a large, like he's a big featherweight. He's well-rounded. Which was not really the case for Brian Ortega that long ago. For a while, he was like a top 5 ranked fighter that I was like, yeah, he's one-dimensional. He's kind of weak on the feet. That's not the case anymore. I mean, he can fight at both stances. He works behind a really good jab. I mean, go back to the Korean Zombie fight. He won that fight with just that single punch, just jabbing him to death. He wasn't following up with combos, which was a little bit of an issue for me. But when he lets his hands flow, I mean, he's a good boxer. I mean, he rips the body. He has some really hard kicks. He throws kicks. He throws a lot of kicks to the body, to the legs, and that's because he doesn't care if you catch a kick, because he wants to grapple, especially if you catch a kick. That's sometimes where you can kind of catch a guillotine or something in there as you're trying to take him down. He makes mistakes of like pillaring defense, which is why Alex Volkanovski ripped him to the body a lot. He ripped him in the body in the clinch too, but ripped him in the body on the feet. When he's in the clinch, one thing Brian Ortega does that I love, he'll get in the clinch and actually like reach over his opponent's head and like jump to a guillotine. And I said this before him, he's not a Damian Maia type grappler or a Jacare where they take you down and slowly inch. He's a Charles Oliveira one. Like, he just wants a scramble to happen. He catches you in the scramble. Very opportunistic. Like you mentioned, I think about like the comeback win against Moicano or a couple other fights, but obviously the Volkanovski one he was so close to winning the title because that's all he needs. He can lose the entire fight and he only needs 1 second. And if he finds an opening, he seizes on it, and very few people are going to get out. Only a guy like Alex Volkanovski get out. He not a strong wrestler. He kind of reaches for takedowns. In fact, it's actually more likely that he would kind of shoot and then like pull guard underneath it, like a lot of guys like to do. That's Ortega's background, but that was a lot before he was the striker that he is. Like, he's much different strikers now. Obviously his striking becomes stronger, sets up his own takedowns. Now, Yair Rodriguez, first of all, it's nice to see him being active, because it's been like we went through so much time of him not seeing him fight. So it's nice to see him kind of getting there a couple more times. Sorry about that. He is one of the best athletes I've ever seen in the sport. I mean, he's so fun. He's so exciting. He's an outfighter that can really work his boxing from the outside, but his boxing solid, but he's a kick first guy. Like, his first weapon is kicks, tons of kicks, teep kicks, hard kicks, kicks to the body, oblique kicks. I was there when he fought Jeremy Stevens in Boston, and I was there for the media day and all this stuff. And I was doing coverage for Sherdog, and they did the open workouts. That was the same time Dominic Reyes fought Chris Weidman. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you right now, Yair Rodriguez kicks pads just as hard as Dominic Reyes does. It's insane. The sound that he was nailing. It was so, I'll never forget it. It was so impressive to me. Another thing he likes to do, he likes to he's a lot of guys will throw kicks and then throw punches and follow with kicks. He does the opposite. He'll throw kicks and then follow with the punches. And he lands more as they're trying to stop kicks. Throw out the spinning attacks. He'll throw some aerial attacks, flying knees. Obviously, we talked about Brian Ortega only need a second. You always have to kind of like always be wary of the things he can do in grappling. That's how it is Rodriguez with the striking. Like, he'll throw something out and then spinning back elbow. Obviously the elbow he landed on the Korean Zombie, that's him. Like, he's creative. You never know. You always have to be aware of all of his limbs, because he can land something and put your lights out. He used to be a weak defensive wrestler, but we saw a little bit of improvement in going back to that Jeremy Stevens fight where Stevens was trying to wrestle him, and he kind of struggled to get Yair Rodriguez down. The other thing we should say about him is that he struggled to go 25 minutes, and that's not the case anymore. He's going hard. He's shown they can go deep in the fights. I mean, the Max Holloway fight, like, yeah, he slowed down, but he was going hard in that fight and did pretty well. I shouldn't say pretty well, but he had moments. This fight is amazing. If it remains on the feet, we could be in for like a really good fight, a real treat. However, the gap in grappling is so large for me to ignore. I don't see Ortega just rushing in, trying to shoot a takedown, close the distance. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to have some really fun back and forth exchanges on the feet. But eventually, I think there's going to be a moment in grappling where it just happens when these guys are throwing stuff out. Yair Rodriguez throws a spinning back elbow, and halfway through, Ortega jumps on his back or something. and we get a brief moment of grappling. And I think that's all it's going to take for Ortega. I think Ortega is going to secure a submission. I can see him like jumping on a guillotine or something like that. I say Ortega wins by second round submission.
Fantastic. I love your assessment of Ortega's his skills, like his core skills, and then the way his other skills have developed over his time in the UFC. Like, yeah, he was a one-dimensional grappling
Can I say
specialist.
something?
Sure.
Alex Volkanovski beat the shit out of Brian Ortega.
Yep.
But would it ever shock you if Brian Ortega won the title?
No.
No, me neither.
No.
Sorry.
And
Okay, continue.
no, that's actually what I'm getting around to here. Obviously, for a long time, he came across as a one-dimensional submission specialist. Like, not even a grappling specialist, but specifically a submission specialist.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And you mentioned that, it's the kind of Charles Oliveira thing. You can tell that he is a disciple of Rener and Here and Gracie. Like, the first I ever became aware of Brian Ortega, like if he was even in the UFC yet, he was within his first 2 or 3 fights, is he would show up on those Gracie breakdown videos on YouTube, with the brothers. And I'm sure they just brought him on because he was undefeated and good looking and like they have a funny rapport. But yeah, he's got that kind of unorthodox, flowy, opportunistic type submission attack. My favorite stat, to quote about Ortega, he won his first 7 fights in the UFC. Like, obviously, one was overturned to a no contest, but he whooped that ass. But he won his first 7 fights in the UFC, so made it all the way to a title shot, against Max Holloway without winning a single round. He did not win a single round in any of his first 7 fights in the UFC. Made it all the way to a title shot. And against Holloway, he might have won 1 round. He legit won a decision against Chan Sung Jung. That's the first time he ever obviously won more than 2 rounds in a fight. So the one thing that has not changed about Ortega, even as he's filled out his skill set, he's not a round winner. Of course, I wasn't shocked that he almost tapped out Volkanovski. Something was going to happen. Just the question would be, when that one moment comes, is it enough for him to spring the upset? Because he wasn't going to win on the scorecards. He has a striking style that is dangerous, but doesn't lend itself to out-voluming people, especially not once you get up to the Max Holloways and Alexander Volkanovskis and Yair Rodriguez's of the world. And then he is an incredibly opportunistic grappler, but it's all a matter of things getting to the ground the way he wants or needs it, which is why, he's willing to jump to a guillotine or like kind of blow a takedown and pull guard. I could see Rodriguez just winning a decision if that moment never comes for Ortega. Like, if that moment doesn't come for Ortega, Rodriguez probably wins 4 out of 5 rounds in a super fun fight. But like you said, the disparity in skill is so great on the ground that it'll only take once. If Alexander Volkanovski were not as tough as he is, as smart as he is, and have as thick a neck as he does, none of which Rodriguez has, Brian Ortega would be your champ right now. So for me, it's just a matter of what round. The moment's going to come, and I think when it comes, it's going to be enough. And Ortega probably gets a submission. Call it round 3 for me, and it might be the classic Ortega fight where he is down 2 rounds to none, and he's losing the 3rd when, boom, he sees the right moment, he jumps a guillotine, wraps up guard, and Rodriguez, they both crash to the ground. Rodriguez is tapping out a few seconds later. Give me Brian Ortega by 3rd round submission. And yeah, UFC will have a new problem. That's it for the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ABC3, Ortega versus Rodriguez. I've been your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog. He has been Keith, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. If this is your first time listening to us, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you got something out of it. Please do like, subscribe, make a comment. Keith and I will both respond. We love going back and forth with you in the comment section. But most importantly of all, join us on the recap. And I can finally say us, because for the first time in 3 weeks, it should actually be both of us on the recap show together. No, are you out that one as well? Awesome. Then
we'll talk later. I was thinking about this weekend. Sorry.
Okay. then I think we'll both be there. But regardless, one of us will be running the show. It's live on the Sherdog YouTube page, usually about 10 or 15 minutes after the main event, where we will break down all these fights in reverse order of how we previewed them, just going from the top to the bottom, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was controversial. There is always something. And most importantly, the live chat is wide open. Our listeners are there. We hope you join them. There's a lot of good back and forth as we take your questions, your comments, your hot takes. Between now and then, thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. And of course, enjoy the fights.